So, welcome everyone to the WorkshopBank Podcast. I'm very excited today because I'm joined by an absolute legend in the facilitation world. His name's Jim Ruff, and he is the godfather of Dynamic Facilitation. Some of you may have seen session 2 that I did with Alex Nairn a few weeks back. Alex took us through the process of dynamic facilitation, and here with us today we have the person who came up with the concept, who's going to tell us the origin story of dynamic facilitation from over 25 years ago. And he now travels around the world teaching DF to his own community of followers. And certainly from my experience, they're a passionate bunch, Jim's followers, because since Alex's interview, I've had a number of them reach out to me and say hello and say, what a great conversation that was. So welcome to them. Hi to them. I'm glad you're with us. So hi Jim. Nice to meet you, and welcome to WorkshopBank.
Nice to meet you, Nick.
Fantastic. Okay, so I want to do two or three things in this podcast, if that's all right, Jim. I want to hear your origin story, hear where it all started, and I want to delve into one case study with you. One of your best case studies. You must have done quite a few now in the last 25 years, but I want to hear one that's had a major impact, not only on the people that were participants, but also on you. I guess it would be great to hear a bit of that side of the story as well. Because the people who listen to WorkshopBank want to hear stuff that's actionable, and they want the stuff that makes it real for them. So as many real life case study scenarios as we can possibly get, we want, because we learn so much better from real life case studies. So tell me, please, where did DF Dynamic Facilitation come from, and how did you get into it, and when did it become a thing for you? Because it was probably just, I don't know, it was probably just something you were doing for a while, and then you realised it was an actual thing, a living being that was taking over your life. So I'm really excited to hear about that.
Well, that's exactly right. I was a consultant in an employee of a timber company, Simpson Timber Company, and I was also studying Jungian psychology in my kind of private time mostly, and I was also fascinated by the issue of creativity, and I was on the faculty at the Creative Problem Solving Institute, and the task was I was trying to get a quality circles group going in the mill, and management said, no, we don't want that. We don't, but we want you to keep meeting. We want you to meet with those people and make them feel better, but we don't want you to spend any money on training, and we don't want you to spend any money on, we don't want to be there. We don't want the foreman there, but we'll pay the men to show up. So what happened is that the management of this mill, I accepted it because I thought that I wanted to focus on creativity. So I wanted them to solve impossible to solve problems. I mean, if creativity exists, then presumably we can solve impossible to solve problems. So I wanted to pursue that, and I really didn't get it at the time, but management had given me an opportunity to have a laboratory with real people walking in the door.
Yeah.
I got to try out different processes to see if I could get it to work. And I found that it didn't work. That all this stuff that I had been learning about brainstorming, and I thought the Osborne-Parnes technology and the synectics and different creative thinking strategies, they didn't apply to real problems, not the kind of problems these guys had, which were, I hate the foreman, I hate my life, I want out of here, how do I make things work?
Right,
that kind of issue.
So fairly large scale. Issues.
Yeah, so I asked them to pick some impossible to solve issues to work on. And at the beginning, they would choose issues like, let's fire the foreman. You know, if we could fire that guy, my life would be better. I'd say, great, let's work on that. You know, which is not the kind of issue a quality circle program would choose. Yeah. But it was their issue, and they were angry, and they wanted action. Yeah. So I thought, well, fine, let's work on that. And in the process, I wanted to help them be creative in solving it. So I just did whatever it took to help engender a creative spirit around this task. And, you know, they would eventually come to this realization, gosh, you know, as they would talk, they would come up with data, for instance, and I would write down, oh, that's a piece of data. And the data would be, gee, he's not a bad guy when I run into him away from the mill and in a bar or something. Well, so that would be a piece of data. And I'd realize as I'd write it down that people would shift. All of a sudden they would have these insights that I'm not so interested in firing them anymore. The real problem is the whole mill, the whole management system. And what would happen, and this is maybe we're getting into the case study, as it turns out I wasn't thinking of that, but what would happen is that the problem would get bigger, but their feeling of empowerment would get stronger.
Okay.
In other words, they would shift from firing the foreman seems doable, but changing the management system of the mill seems bigger, seems more impossible, and yet they would be more excited and more empowered to go do that.
So, and more positive as well. Would their general emotional state be? Would they be feeling better that they'd got to that position, or?
Yes, more excited about it, and more connected with one another, and people would go, yeah, that's it, and so it was an odd progression. The problem would get bigger and worse, sort of speak, but their excitement and sense of empowerment would get even more. And I remember they would test. They would, also work on issues at the same time. They would work on, why is lumber getting ruined at this machine center or something like that. And they would have breakthroughs around that too. They would have marvelous breakthroughs to fix that. And in time, what would happen is that just by the way they were working and coming up with insights, they were changing the management system of the mill. And so they were tracking both of these, that they were solving impossible to solve problems in the mill, and they were changing the big one, which was solving the management problem. All of a sudden now the employees would be managing their own equipment, and and the foreman would not have to do all this work, and they would go do something else.
So was the foreman involved in the process as well? Did the management come in, or?
So what happened at the first was that the foreman missed the first year. And when it finally became time to involve them, I asked them, we've reached this, it's a year, it's a time to get involved. And both of them, well, there was a moment of tears actually, when they realized how that they just didn't realize these people could be like this. And they were upset at themselves and at the situation. And when it came time to join the group, both the night shift foreman and the day shift foreman got sick. Neither had ever been sick before. And they wanted to be a part of the group, but they were afraid, I think. Or I don't know. I mean, they were really sick, but it was the only time they were sick, and they were both sick. So I think it was a powerful time of transition when they did join the group and became full participants in the process. Yeah. So the original problem was to fire the foreman, and what happened was there was a transformation of the foreman, there was a transformation of the system, and along the way they were solving lots of impossible to solve problems, where I would tease them. I would say, they would say there's nothing you can do about it. We have to hire another employee. That's the only thing you can do. And then I would tease them and we'd just start working on it. And they would have a mind shift of thinking creatively. All of a sudden they would say, well, let's go look at it. And then everybody jump up and we'd run downstairs and look at how the machine was hanging up or something. And all of a sudden new ideas would start popping. And, then you'd point to them later. But remember these charts I wrote down where you said it was impossible to solve this? Yeah. Well, notice that you've solved it. It was a lot of fun, really.
So you weren't just sitting in a room with them. You were. I've now got this picture of a group of people running around from one problem area to another. Was it?
No, mostly sitting in the room, and I would have a flip chart, and they would say something, and I would write it on the flip chart and reflect it back to them. Yeah. And what would happen over time is that the group would feel they would start to see opportunities. And I was basically protecting people because they wanted to criticize one another. They wanted to criticize themselves. They wanted to be angry at their situation. Whatever. My role was to accept everything they were saying, but to keep everyone safe. So that when someone would say, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How could you possibly think that? I would grab that person and say, well, tell me what your concern is, or what, and then I would come back to the other person and ask them what they had just said. And in other words, nobody got to pick on anybody. It was always a puzzle that we were working on.
And you'd always make sure the conversation would go through you rather than them start attacking each other.
Yes, not always, but if it ever became delicate, yes.
Yeah.
And they would have lots of. What they did was they transformed the management system of the mill, and which is really what they started out wanting to do. And they.
So management completely bought in. How long was that process from start to transformation?
A year and a half. The foreman became involved, and it took about a year and a half, and people just realized, hey, we're working in a different place.
Yeah.
And that, we would have different problems that would come up that were really, I don't know, like one that's coming to mind now is that we had these were big logs, and we had this crane that operated this monster log that would place it in position for another machine. And these guys would sit in their little glass booths. And these two guys hated one another, basically.
Right.
So they would operate these monster log equipment, and I finally brought them in the room together, and we were working on the problem of maintenance, that we need another maintenance guy. That was it. And they knew it was impossible to hire another maintenance guy. And the more we got talking and and sharing, it turned, I didn't know these guys didn't like each other. But what I later got told by the foreman, but basically what they would do is they would realize that, I forgot, I just remembered. I asked them what was the number one problem they had. And so we worked it through, and it was this piece of equipment that get hung up. And we worked it through, and what they were able to do is cut out a little piece of metal so that it no longer hung up at all. It wasn't like we didn't have to clean up anything. And it turned out that these guys started double dating. They liked each other. The level of maintenance required was way down. The level of cleanup required was way down. The level of, in other words, everything they just touched, just like the heavens would part and the blue sky would come out, and it would just be like this miracle.
A beautiful thing.
And so these guys were really liking one another. One time I remember I was using some just normal creative stuff, and I said, what are you thinking about? You know, and they said, well, I'm thinking about this data I've got. And I said, well, you know, what about it? And the guy starts talking about how he wants to make love with this gal, you know. And I said, well, tell me more about making love. What's involved? Let's take this machine center we've got here and let's make love to it. What do we need to do, you know? It's more of the other stuff, but oh, it was a riot. And they were laughing so hard, and they were coming up with, we need better, you know, lubricants, and we need better, you know, more foreplay. I mean, it was just a joy. But what they did is they did change lubricants, and they invented a different procedure that they used to make this thing happen, and they developed a new relationship with the union of handling complaints about it. And so it was
wow.
It was just, you've got me talking about something different than dynamic, you know, I mean, I teach dynamic facilitation. I don't get into some of the traditional creative stuff, but it provides a perfect umbrella for you know, just departing into brainstorming or departing into
and going
playing in these ways,
going wherever you need to go. So after this experience, when did you start thinking that this was something you need to now package up and turn into a movement, which is what it is now?
A long time, really. What happened is that I would start seminars and say in the seminars, well, look, let's practice this skill. This is a procedure that I've learned. It's just a different way of facilitating. I thought it was regular facilitation when I started, and in time discovered it was really different than traditional facilitation. And so when my wife and I moved and I started teaching seminars in this process, I realized, hey, this is something people should know about. But I just thought it was facilitation. I'd called it participative leadership, facilitation, whatever. And but as a way of choose issues from society that people cared about. You know, like just like the mill workers walking in and picking something impossible, I'd say, well, you pick something impossible and we'll get creative and see if we don't make progress on it. Mm-hmm. So they would make progress on these big monster issues, and it was really out of the progress from those issues that I began to get it, that I can't talk about the regular facilitation, because if you want to do this, you can't just have a good facilitator. I mean, somebody can't be a master facilitator and do this. They have to learn something different. And often, in fact, some of the people that were known as master facilitators would come to the seminar, and we'd have beginners. And the beginners would have a lot easier time picking up on dynamic facilitation than the credentialed master facilitators. So, you know, things would build up, and all of a sudden you're realizing, well, this is just not, it's not the same thing. It's something different.
Yeah. And it's just something that you'd learned over time. So it wasn't something that you felt like you'd gone through a course or a seminar and picked it up. It had just evolved inside you.
It is, yeah. And of course I was with, you know, I had these seminars, and I teach seminars now for more than 20 years. And I'm with really bright people, you know, and we're working on real issues. So, I mean, how often does that happen when really, really bright people come together in a room and pick some issue like global warming or you know, inner city crime or traffic or whatever, and make headway, and in a brilliant way, and people are looking at one another excited. My God, we've come up with something. And that something has narrowed down too. So now I'm working, you know, headlong on this concept I call the Wisdom Council, which is, really sort of tipping in cities in Central Europe.
Yeah, tell me about the Wisdom Council. How is that different from the process, or is it the same, and with it just a different direction?
Yeah, well, I mean, one way to think about it is DF works great for a small group. You're helping a small group. How do we make that happen for a large system? Very large system. And really, that's what happened in the mill. When you change the management system of the mill, even though I was working with this one day shift and night shift small group, somehow the whole mill changed system. So in a sense, I was facilitating a very large system of people, although in practice, I was only DFing one small group on day and one small group on night. And later, the whole mill got involved, but they were involved anyway.
Yeah.
This is kind of what is happening in the cities, really in Austria in particular, and in cities of Western Austria especially, is we randomly select 12 citizens, and they meet for like a day and a half with a dynamic facilitator. And in the process, people work on what they might think is impossible to solve, and they don't maybe solve it, but they come up with a unified perspective that everybody's excited about.
Yeah.
And it turns out when they present that perspective to the assembled community in a town meeting, everybody talks about it, and then we realize, gee, the whole room kind of feels the same way, that this is, we're all on the same page.
So you get consensus just from having a sample size of 12?
We don't call it consensus.
Okay.
We call it consensus.
Okay.
Because it's really different. This is one of the problems, is that in dynamic facilitation, all the words that have meaning, like dialogue or consensus or decision, all these words we just don't use anymore because they really send us in the wrong direction.
Right.
A decision, for instance, is something that happens. It means to cut away. It's something that happens in my left brain. It's a judgment.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is we're doing all a creative process. We're almost don't have any judgment in it. Certain people and of ideas, we've eliminated judgment.
Yeah.
We're constantly in a creating mode, a co-creative mode, and we look around every so often and notice that we're all on the same page. We all know what to do.
Yeah.
That's a lot like a decision, but we didn't get there using any of the same mental processing. We got there through a totally different way of thinking.
Yeah. So tell me about an example that's happening in Austria that's getting you. Is it that maybe is currently going on, or has gone through the process and they've created something amazing?
They've created something amazing, and it's spreading, thank God, because I mean, in my mind, this is how we're going to solve the world problem and become sustainable as a society, is where all of us somehow are in one conversation and we're addressing these impossible seeming problems and we're reaching near unity about what to do about them. So that is win-win. That is the solution, in my mind, that's the strategy for solving these global problems that we're facing. And it's becoming really important to me to realize that if we used words like decision, we use words like consensus, we use words like, some of these words, they're not the same, and we need to keep the process pure in order to be able to do that. So what they're doing in Austria is that they have many cities have tried this, randomly selecting people, having them meet a day and a half, having them present in large town meetings. And it's a way to bypass the partisan gridlock. It's a way for the legislators to feel connected with the mainstream citizens and not just the usual people that show up and get mad at at the public meetings. It's a way to educate the citizens about the issues. So and they've done it. Maybe an example is, my favorite example is in Bregenz, which is the westernmost city of Austria. It's right on Lake Constance. That city is very close to the lake, except there's a highway and a railroad track that goes between it and the park and the lake. And there's a development right in the heart of, or there's a parking lot right in the heart of Bregenz that should be a development. Or developers want to develop, but they haven't for like 30 years because the conflicts get so bad.
Right.
So they selected the 12 citizens, and they looked at what the development project was, and they came up with a unanimous perspective about how to change it, to make it work.
Okay.
And basically they said, this is a 1 in 100-year opportunity for us as a community to come into relationship with the lake, and that's what we want. We have this highway and this train between us and the lake, and we want to be connected. And this project should be a process of helping us connect to the lake. And one way to do that would be to have the project be more on the second floor instead of the lower floor, and have it be able to spill over onto the lake, like with the Spanish stairs or something.
Yeah.
And basically the developers and everybody in the room said, yeah, that's great. Let's do that.
Wow.
And
wow.
It's just, has the big conflict situation that everybody anticipated, and is under, it's beginning construction this spring.
Wow, that's amazing. So the developers are using some of the land to do whatever they want to do to make money commercially, and they're giving something to the community at the same time, or are the developers just doing whatever the community wants?
Community is basically saying, here's the way this project should work.
Yeah.
And the saying, hey, that's even better than what we thought. The mayor is happy, and everybody's happy. So if I was President Obama right now, struggling with this partisan gridlock,
yeah,
break it.
He should get you involved. Has he not called?
I'd love for him to know about this. Well, I've contacted all my elected representatives and written him and faxed him and stuff. But to me, that's a way to resolve a lot of these problems that we're facing. It's a way for the EU to deal with some of this banking mess that's going on right now in Spain and Italy. And Greece.
Yeah. And it's only going to get worse, especially in the economic crisis. The relationship between the public and the legislature just gets worse and worse and worse, doesn't it? So
it's not only it's the relationship between the elected officials and the public, but it's also a relationship between the system and the elected and the public. You see, what we've done is we've structured a system that is in charge of us. It's a really goofy way to go. And so we have people that want to teach schools. We have kids that want to be taught together. And yet we have a system that says, oh no, we can't do that because we have a budget crisis. So how do we jump into the kind of thinking process where we are in charge, where we, the people, come together and say, oh, well, let's set up a system that actually works rather than be subjects of this system.
Yeah.
That's the kind of breakthrough that is possible if we enter into the space of what I call choice creating, which is what dynamic facilitation elicits.
So why Austria, number one, and why not more? Why? I was talking to Alex in session 2, and he was saying that he's found it really difficult to get government officials in the UK to say yes to dynamic facilitation. And possibly is one of the reasons why you're finding it hard to get to President Obama, though. Although if you're watching Obama, you should be. Jim's contact details are below this podcast, and you can get hold of him through that link. I know you're on LinkedIn, so So why Austria, and why not the world? Why?
Well, it will be the world. I don't see a way other yet. I mean, there's other answers out there, but here's an actual answer. And part of your question is, why is it that people are so anxious about the environmental crisis and the debt crisis and whatever? Here's a guy saying there's a solution. And why is it that they turn and run? You know? And really it's those kind, and why is it that people can leave the seminar so excited? Everybody leaves the seminar with their arms outstretched, ecstatic. How is it possible to get reabsorbed into the Borg, if you will?
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that expression.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
But to me, that's exactly what it is. It's kind of like there's a quality of thinking that we all know that happens in a crisis often, where somehow we can pull together and be creative and change everything. We know that quality of thinking, and it exists. I've given it a name. I call it choice creating. And it's different than decision making. But it's a quality of thinking that where we break our walls of denial. We're safe in our walls of denial. We have these denial that we live in. We say, okay, I can't do this. I can do this, but I can't do that. There's certain things that are possible, certain things that are not. And we live in this, and it gives us a serenity. In fact, there's even the serenity prayer, which is, to me, a way of setting up a wall of denial that keeps me serene and calm, but I know what I can do, I know what I can't do. It's sort of like a denial of the creative possibility that's in me. And people come into touch with that creative possibility. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's not normal in a way. It's
because they feel like they're losing control of their reason for being, or
I don't know about that. I think it's that we're really not in control. Period. I mean, we really aren't. But there's this kind of man-made or human-made concept that life can be controlled, and so we set up situations where we can actually do that. But they aren't very long-lasting.
Or at least have a shot of doing that. I don't think.
A shot at doing it. Yeah.
I don't think anyone actually does it, do they?
Well, I don't. Yeah, we can go to the moon and come back, and it worked, But
we're not going to do it again, though.
But so there's a quality of thinking in us where we drop the denial and we just see a certain we have access to our potential. And we surprise ourselves with our potential, and it's dangerous too, because it's traumatic. I mean, when there's a crisis like that, it can be traumatic. So I don't have the answers on this, but those are hints in my mind about what's happening. What could explain that we are collectively terminal, and yet we're happy to stay in this space of denial and continue to pursue economic growth as though this can go on forever. At some point, there's a waking up to, there's a reaching the crisis point, and then we wake up, or we can begin the wake-up process through a facilitation. And that's what I think Dynamic Facilitation offers, that capability, and the Wisdom Council offers it at a large group, a large system, in a large system way.
And is the Wisdom Council only happening in Austria at the moment, or is it a body, or is it a company, or is it what is it?
We have some people in Austria, in particular, Riegel and Rita Trotnig and a few others that get it. And they are paid a salary, and they are incredibly respected people. Keep them in mind. And one thing about the Austria experience is that I just attended a conference in Austria sponsored by the government on the topic of ending this dependence on growth, economic growth. You can't mention that in the U.S.
No.
You can't even mention it. It was sponsored by the government.
Wow.
And the fact that they don't have to have a defense industry. They don't do that. And they know they've accepted their shadow in a way that the rest of the world hasn't. They know that there's evil out there and that they have participated, and they're basically saying, hey, let's do something better. I think the German-speaking lands are going to be the leading element in the future here. They're pioneering. I mean, they're taking the ideas that I came up with and other people that I know that are pioneers, and they're listening. They're working with it.
Yeah. Has it spread across the border into Germany?
Yes. Yeah. There's the Germany too has had a number of wisdom councils and seems to be. In fact, in Switzerland too is beginning, and I think there's a great talk that Manfred gave in Sweden, and I know that there's going to be a group from Asia that's coming.
Yeah.
Take a look, and so I just feel really optimistic that this is.
Saving the world's great, but I would just really like Skype to work consistently. That'd be really nice. I
appreciate your curiosity, though. That's really nice.
No, I think it's a really interesting solution to some massive problems, and you're right. We absolutely do need solutions to some of the biggest problems that we've faced in a long time. And this isn't these recessions that the world's going through. They're not just going to suddenly go away. They're going to be around for a long time, way longer than the life of this podcast. So we need to solve them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And see, the way I think about it is, it could end tomorrow. It could end tomorrow because what we're doing is we're just holding on to an existing system. And this system is terminal. And it's really about people with resources, with desires, with needs, with shared needs coming together. That's really what an economic system's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And what our current economic system is doing is it's preventing that coming together. It's set up as though we don't have collective needs, that we can compete. It's based on competition. So I believe what's going to happen eventually, and maybe sooner rather than later, is we're all going to look at one another and say, hey, our economic system isn't working to give us what we need, and we need to do something else. And just in saying that, and just in thinking that, we've created a new economic system.
Yeah.
In other words, as soon as we start collectively thinking what we need, and working toward it, that is an economic system.
Yeah.
But that thinking process is prevented in our current system.
Yeah. So Jim, how do people get involved? How can listeners reach you and get it and meet you and come to your seminars? What's your schedule like in the coming months?
Well, we're going to be going back to Europe. We're teaching a seminar in Northern California, and then we're going to Northern Europe again, or going to Southern Europe again, wherever it is, Central Europe.
Central Europe, yeah.
Austria and Switzerland and Germany.
Yeah.
And we have a seminar scheduled in the UK. But the website is Wise. There's two websites. One is dynamicfacilitation.com.
Yeah.
And the other is wisedemocracy.org. And the wisedemocracy.org is our nonprofit organization, and it's about how to really set in motion a new system of democracy, really. And as far as I can tell, it's really working. It's going to happen. We need people like you that kind of get it and get involved. And part of getting it, I think, is to come to the seminar.
Yeah.
It's a 3-day seminar and a 4-day seminar sometimes when people come back. And then there's an understanding about choice creating, an understanding of the principles of dynamic facilitation, and you can start practicing and bringing it forward. And then hopefully there's an understanding about the Wisdom Council and how this is how we can come together as a society.
Yeah.
How we come together as communities.
And then do you personally support whenever you can, if a large company or a large body or a government wants the man himself, the Godfather, to be involved? You're available to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I haven't figured out how to get, how to earn. I know how to earn a living if my focus is on serving corporations.
Yeah.
I don't know how to earn a living if my focus is on saving the world.
Yeah.
There's nobody in our system that's willing to pay for that.
No. I think
it's an odd system. So to the extent that, and what we do is we charge really for the seminar, and then don't try and just give most everything else away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way it seems to work out.
Yeah.
And then we, for people that can't afford it, we work out something else to them to come to.
Well, that's great. I'll make sure all of those links are below this video and below the podcast, so people can get hold of you and reach out to you. Is LinkedIn the best place to get you, or through your website?
No, it took me about 15 minutes to figure out how to read your
okay.
message.
Don't contact Jim through LinkedIn.
Yeah, probably just email, I think.
Okay. And what's your email address, Jim?
Well, one is Jim at dynamicfacilitation.com, and another is Jim at wisedemocracy.org.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time, and I'm really glad we managed to get through this. I'm glad Skype let us get through this, and I'm really glad that we worked out the time difference between us as well. But all the best, and maybe we can do a catch-up again at some point in the future and see what's been happening in the time between now and then. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. Good.
Fantastic.
Nice to meet you, Nick.